Here we go. All right. So just general overview. When we talk about cell energy, we're talking about two processes, photosynthesis and cellular respiration. As a side note, in cell respiration, there are two kinds. So really, in theory, we should say photosynthesis and then aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration, okay? Um, Long story short, photosynthesis, oh, can't type tonight. Photosynthesis makes glucose, and cellular respiration breaks glucose. Now, we know that our all living things are synthesizing, which means building molecules, and digesting, breaking down molecules all the time. So photosynthesis is actually a synthesis reaction, right? You're building with light. And what are you building? Glucose. Now, glucose is a pretty large molecule, relatively speaking, C6H12O6, and it has energy stored in it. And energy is stored in the bonds between different atoms. So in order to make that energy accessible, you have to break those bonds, and that's what cell respiration does. So photosynthesis stores cellular energy as glucose. Cell respiration breaks the bonds in that molecule to release ATP. And maybe I don't think that's too misleading, but when we say release ATP, we're talking about to power the storage of energy in that bond between ADP and the third phosphate group, okay, which we're forming during the electron transport chain in cell respiration, okay. As an overview, photosynthesis is composed of the light reactions and the Calvin cycle, okay. Cellular respiration, at least if it's aerobic, is glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and ETC, or the electron transport chain, okay? Respiration, if it's anaerobic, can either be, lactic acid or alcoholic fermentation, okay? Aerobic, anaerobic, it just means with or without oxygen. So aerobic, think of an aerobic workout, you're gonna be using lots of oxygen. Anaerobic, no oxygen required, or none may be available, okay? For photosynthesis in the light reactions, you want to remember that sunlight excites the electrons in chlorophyll, causing water to split into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is then released as a waste product. And the hydrogen is picked up by NADPH and carried to the Calvin cycle. Okay. Calvin cycle is a little simpler. For our purposes, the Calvin cycle, the hydrogen from NADPH combines with carbon dioxide to form a sugar molecule, or to form glucose. Now, it takes more than one water molecule, obviously, to make a molecule of sugar. So if you think about it, there's C6H12. So you're going to have to split apart way more than one molecule of water to get enough hydrogens to make glucose. Okay. So it's not like it happens once and then stops. These light reactions are always happening. Okay. Churning out hydrogen and oxygen. Okay. And that's photosynthesis. That's it. That's as far as we're going to get into photosynthesis right now. If you continue on and you study biology AP at the next level, you'd talk more about the different photosystems. For right now, we're not going to split it up into those. You got a preview of that with your review, but this is what's important to remember for the exam tomorrow. Just the last note on that is that this is all occurring in the chloroplasts. It's occurring in the chloroplast. And there are two major parts that you need to know for the chloroplast. You've got the thylakoids, which are the stacks of green pancake-looking things. Pancakes. And this is where the light reactions happen. And then you've got the stroma. That's just the cytoplasm of the chloroplast. And that's Calvin cycle. Okay. So any questions on photosynthesis?
Going on the thylakoids, isn't like a whole stack of them a granium?
A granum, yes, that's correct. And that's one of those words like bacteria. Yeah, bacteria is plural. Mitochondria is plural, right? So a granum is singular. Grana, Grana, is plural. Granum is not geranium. Sorry, granum is singular. Okay, just to keep those separate. I don't believe that would make a difference on the exam tomorrow. But just as a heads up, that's just want to throw that out there. Okay. So cell respiration, I already kind of did an overview up here of the 3 steps. Okay. So now just to break down those steps. So now we have a molecule of glucose. That's great. But cells can't get energy from glucose. It's just too big. The molecule is too big. And keep in mind, when we're talking about cell energy, the energy is powering very small reactions, right? We're talking about active transport here, where you're pushing ions, which are just possibly single atoms, across a membrane, okay? So ATP is the chemical energy that all living things have to utilize to do work at the cellular level, okay? Glucose is just too big, okay? So you've got to then be able to release this energy that's stored in glucose so that cells can use it, okay? So we use, or let's say living things, use glucose to power the conversion of ADP into ATP, okay? So remember, ADP would be like the battery that's drained. ATP is fully charged, okay? And it gets fully charged, okay, by storing the energy contained in a molecule of sugar, okay? Now, for our purposes, we keep talking about sugar. There are other molecules that might go through respiration, but for right now, we're going to focus on glucose, okay? So the first step is just, well, that molecule is so big, you've just got to get it to be a little smaller, okay? So that occurs in glycolysis, okay? Glycolysis is the least efficient, well, it's not very efficient. Let's just say not very efficient only produces about 2 ATP. Okay. Now, once you are done with glycolysis, okay, you've created a new molecule called pyruvic acid. Okay. Now, pyruvic acid gets broken down a little bit more in the transition reactions before it heads to the Krebs cycle. Okay. Now, Krebs cycle is next. So I'll ask you some practice questions in a few minutes. Okay. Krebs cycle is next. And basically, what you need to know for Krebs cycle is that it also produces 2 ATP. Ooh, I forgot one thing. Occurs in the mitochondria. Just a note, the glycolysis is not very efficient and it occurs in the cytoplasm, okay? And technically it's anaerobic. So glycolysis does not use oxygen, okay? Now, electron transport chain produces the majority of ATP from a glucose molecule, okay? Now, different classes went into different detail on the electron transport chain, okay? So if we did not go into detail on this, you can tune out for a second here, okay? First period and fourth period, you need to know that formation of ATP during the electron transport chain is happening due to ATP synthase in the protein, well, synthase pump, okay, which is located in the mitochondria, okay? So again, synthase, all you have to remember, synthase, that's an enzyme, ASE, synthesis enzyme, so it's building ATP, okay? Braden.
So does the entirety of the Krebs cycle so the Krebs cycle takes place in the mitochondria, and then
Correct.
the electron transport chain takes place where?
Also in the mitochondria, at the membrane of the mitochondria. Because remember, it's kind of attached, it occurs like right on the membrane. That was one of the questions on the exam today, I believe. So it was like true, false, like it occurs on the inner membrane. That's ETC, not the Krebs cycle, okay? So the process occurring on the membrane is actually the electron transport chain. Okay, any other questions on that?
Yeah, that's a quick question for me. How much ATP does electron transport chain create again?
32 ATP.
Okay.
Okay, so total here, you're looking at around 36 ATP total. Now, keep in mind, that's ideal. Like if everything went perfectly, that's what would happen. Okay, so it's you might actually create like a little more or a little less than that, depending on the efficiency of the reactions. Okay, and like the molecules going like exactly where they needed to be at the exact time. Okay, so that's an estimate, but that's typically what most people say, 36 to 38 ATP. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
Thank you.
yeah, of course. Now, last thing is just fermentation. And fermentation occurs when no oxygen is available. So basically, since no oxygen is available, respiration, stops after glycolysis. So you're only getting 2 ATP for that entire glucose molecule. That's not very much. So it's very inefficient. And really only very small things like bacteria can survive this way, okay? So complex multicellular organisms, so the cells that make up our bodies, that would not be enough energy for them to function, okay? That's just not enough, okay? So any questions on that so far? Okay, so now in chat, as we go through this, just type in questions that you have, okay? We're gonna go over some more practice questions now, okay? And to give everybody a chance, what I'd say is, instead of saying the answer out loud, why don't you type it into the chat, okay? And then I'll give everybody like 30 seconds and then we'll go over the answer, okay? And again, we're all learning, don't be embarrassed. This should be a safe place. Who cares if you're wrong, okay? Another thing you can do if you're not comfortable writing it in the chat, just write your answers down on paper or come up with it in your head, whatever works for you, okay? Correct, Peter. So glycolysis produces 2 ATP. Well, so glycolysis also produces those molecules of pyruvate, okay? So pyruvate is being produced there, and as well as carbon dioxide. So that's a good point. So carbon dioxide is a waste product of glycolysis. And so that means, like, remember, even the yeast produced carbon dioxide, right? So even when they were performing fermentation, there were still gas bubbles that filled our balloon, okay? Why? Well, glycolysis, the waste product of that is carbon dioxide, okay? Now, let's see here. So I'm going to be mixing up difficulty levels for these questions, okay? So sorry, I'm just changing the size of my screen here. Uh-oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Glad I'm recording all this. There we go. Okay. Okay, so in the chloroplast, the stacks of membranous sacs are called, what are the stacks of pancakes called? So Braden, good job bringing this up before. Let's see. Okay, good. So everyone's on the right track here. So if you're saying thylakoids, so each individual stack or each individual pancake is a thylakoid. So if you stack a bunch of grandma, oh, granum, perfect. Yes. Okay. So the correct answer here is granum, okay, or grana, okay, because the grana are made of thylakoids stacked on top of each other, okay? Any questions on that one? Okay. Next. Glycolysis, oh, sorry, true or false? Glycolysis is an efficient form of energy extraction. Thirty seconds. Okay. Okay, good. So it is false. So it's inefficient. Because remember, out of that entire glucose molecule, glycolysis is only getting 2 ATP. That's not very much. Now, regular cell respiration gets 36. Okay. So a lot more. Okay. So,
And that would be glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. Are they anaerobic? Is that what that's?
Okay, so
And
this
that's why it's
question
inefficient.
this question does not include Krebs cycle or electron transport chain. It's just glycolysis, just the first step. So the first step of the process is inefficient. It only makes 2 ATP. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Next. The source of oxygen produced during photosynthesis is what? Where does the oxygen come from? What molecule? Good. Yep. And it is water. Okay. So this is again the first step in photosynthesis. These are the light reactions. Okay. And what's happening is that sunlight, what is it actually used to do? It's used to break apart that molecule of water. The oxygen then is released, and the hydrogen goes to the next step, which is the Calvin cycle, where it can combine with carbon dioxide to form glucose. Okay, by accepting electrons, the oxygen used in aerobic respiration becomes blank. So basically, other than carbon dioxide, what is the product of cell respiration? Good. So a couple more seconds here. Okay. Okay, so a couple people said 2 answers for this one. So the correct answer is water. So water is the other product. So ATP is one of the products, but oxygen doesn't form ATP. Okay, so the oxygen bonds to the hydrogen electrons and becomes water. So Braden, correct. Yes, it would be. It would be. Uh, that's a good question. Would it be liquid? I will find out for you, Braden. Okay.
I thought it said like on when we first started photosynthesis, it releases water vapor and it takes water up the stem and everything of the leaf and that in like a plant.
So that would be for photosynth. I'm not sure if you're referring to photosynthesis or cell respiration there. Because I can't remember. I'm not positive of exactly which side, but I can research that for you. Okay. I want to get you a better answer than that. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's go next. Another one. Okay. In the presence of oxygen, okay, glycolysis is immediately followed by what? So if oxygen is present, glycolysis is followed by what? So basically, what's the second step in cell respiration?
And Calvin cycle and light reactions are in photosynthesis.
Correct, yes. Okay, good. So everyone got this right, every single person, and you are correct. It is the Krebs cycle. Okay, good job. Krebs cycle. Okay. Heterotrophs, blank. So let me read you these answer choices. So heterotrophs produce food from sunlight, don't need energy, consume other living things for energy, or carry out photosynthesis. Heterotrophs. Which one do heterotrophs do? Let's see here. Got it. Okay, yes. And everyone again, 100% here. Consume other living things for energy. Good. So what are the reactants in photosynthesis? What are the reactants in photosynthesis? What are the... Oh, wait. Good. Water, carbon dioxide, sunlight. Excellent. Okay. Now, for this question, actually, sunlight is not included just because it's kind of assumed. Okay. So for this one, if sunlight is not there, okay, you would just choose carbon dioxide and water. Okay. Next. Okay. True or false? The products of photosynthesis are the same as the reactants of photosynthesis. Okay, good. False, correct. They're not the same. The products are the same as the reactants for cell respiration because they're inverse reactions. Okay, but the products and the reactants for oxygen are, or sorry, for photosynthesis are different. Okay, so which products from the light reactions are required by the Calvin cycle? So again, which products of the light reactions are required by the Calvin cycle? So we have a couple correct answers. Anyone? Oh, okay, here we go. Yeah, good. Good. Okay. So for this one, NADPH for sure. Now, a couple of people said carbon dioxide. Now, that is required for the Calvin cycle, but remember, carbon dioxide isn't coming from the light reactions. So that wouldn't be an answer choice for this one. Okay. So it would be NADPH and ATP. Okay. Okay. Next one. Let's see here. A particularly active cell, like a muscle cell, might contain a large number of blank. So a really active cell, like a muscle cell, might have a high number of what? Or blank. Okay. Good. Yep. Okay, excellent. Mitochondria. Good. Looks like 100%. Yep. Good. Excellent. Okay. Yep. Everybody got it. Good. Okay. Cell respiration uses one molecule of glucose to produce how many ATP? So cell respiration turns one molecule of glucose into how many ATP? Okay, pretty good. Now for this one, you want to go with 36, not 32, because remember, you're going to include the ATP that you made in the Krebs cycle and glycolysis, okay?
So 36 if it's very successful and like no problems are made.
Correct, exactly, yes. And so I'm telling you for this one, the answer choice, it'll be 36.
And when we did the Kahoot, it said 30, or I forgot what it was. It was either the Kahoot or study guide. It was
Said
like
38?
38. Yeah.
Okay, so 38, that's if you don't subtract 2 of the ATP that are used up. So I will double check and I'll confirm that before the test tomorrow and make sure that you have the correct number before the test. Does that make sense? Some people say 36, some people say 38, but only one of those will be a choice on the test, and I'll tell you which one it is tomorrow before we start. Okay.
So it'd be 36 if that 2 ATP are taken off.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Hang on. Let's see if it wants to come in. Okay. There we go. Okay. No. Okay. What is the purpose of the light reactions? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Break down water, split water. Yep. Yeah. Everyone's getting this right so far. Good. Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Next. So now I want to make sure we stop and I want to make sure that I've answered all your questions. So does anyone have any questions that have not gotten answered yet? Great.
So photosynthesis is it's what was it? It's like with the Calvin cycle, and then cell respiration is with the Krebs cycle.
Correct. Yes. Okay, Tim. Let's see here.
Are the equations gonna be on the test too?
Yes, I would make sure you could tell the difference between the two equations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I
hang on
have
one
a
second.
question. Oh, okay. My question was, could you just not really about like the test or anything, but could you post like these? Could you send us the chat from the study session?
Yes, absolutely.
Are we gonna have to like label anything on the test?
Label, no. Okay, so a good question that just came in said, can you explain NADH and NADPH? Okay, yes. So NADH and NADPH are just molecules that are used to transport energy from one reaction to another. Okay, so NADH is used in cell respiration. NADPH is used in photosynthesis. Okay. Those molecules, if you notice, they have the H on the end. The H is hydrogen, which has high energy electrons. Okay. So it is, those molecules are carrying that energy into the next set of reactions. Okay. Now, again, for cell respiration, that's going to be the Krebs cycle and an electron transport chain. For photosynthesis, that's going to be the Calvin cycle. Okay. Now, pyruvic acid, that is just the first thing that glucose is broken down into in glycolysis. Oh, yes. Okay. Let me pull up a diagram. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment here. Okay, so when you're looking at a mitochondria, all of this space in here is blue space. That's the matrix, okay? Now, the membrane or the cristae are these ridges, okay? And they're curved ridges. And all those do are increase the surface area for cell respiration to take place, okay? So when we talk about the ATP synthase, okay, and where ETC is occurring, it's at its inner membrane, okay? The inner membrane and the intermembrane space, okay? Tim, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yep, no problem. Yes, Peter, can we table that for 1 second? Because not every class has to know that one. And I'll explain that in a second. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so this one is for class periods 1 and 4. Okay, so if you're not in periods 1 or 4, you don't have to know this one, okay? But if you're in periods 1 or 4, then hang on, and I'm going to show you a picture again. So hang on 1 second. Okay. So let me share this. Okay, so this picture right here this is the electron transport chain, okay? Now, when you're talking about the electron transport chain, basically what you're seeing is that these molecules here that are embedded in the membrane of the mitochondria, they are pumping hydrogen ions from low to high concentration. Do you see how there's more hydrogens out here, outside of the membrane than inside? Does that make sense? Yes? No? Yes? Okay, so this right here, this is active transport. You're going from low to high, okay? Now, these hydrogen ions now are at a high concentration, so they are trying to move back down their concentration gradient. And they are able to do that. Look, there's nowhere for them to get through here, but they can get through this ATP synthase. So as these hydrogen ions go back down their concentration gradient, okay, they go through this pump and form ATP, okay? And is that helpful, Peter? Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And now here, this word protons, so it says, which is the location of active transport? You would say B, right? Okay. Oop, well, I messed that up, but yours wouldn't be like that. Where is chemiosmosis occurring? Right here. Okay. So the hydrogen ions are going back down. Okay. So that would be A. Where is the concentration of protons high? C. Okay. So high to low. And that's what is storing the energy in ATP. Okay. Now remember, that's only classes 1 and 4 need to know that one. Okay. Okay, other questions. That clears up a lot of questions. Okay, good. Okay. Angelina, yes. So what I would say is that you need to know that animal cells perform lactic acid fermentation, okay? And the yeast are performing alcohol fermentation, okay? That's really the only thing you need to know about that.
Thank you.
Yes, Tim. Okay. Okay, any other questions? No problem.
I have one more question.
Yep, go for it.
Just about the review. Like, what is the review situation? Are we going to be submitting that, or is that just for us to use?
Well, so I posted the points for that. So to be totally honest, since I posted the answers, I'm going to count that as a completion grade for you guys. Okay, so yes, I want you to submit it to that, but that's going to be just whether you did it or not. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So Hannah, good question. So that's referring just referring to these hydrogen ions going from high to low concentration. Okay. So it's just the hydrogen ions moving from high to low concentration through that protein pump, the ATP synthase.
Miss Aziranti,
Yes.
do
Tim?
you call it something Christe?
Yes. The Christe, those are the hang on, let me stop sharing this and go back over here. Oops. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Okay, mitochondria. Okay. So the cristae are these folds right here, okay?
Okay.
So that just is, so basically when we're talking about the electron transport chain, where is that happening? It's happening at this membrane here, right? So the ions are pumped out and then they flow back down back inside. So it's like they're pushed out and then they come back in, pushed out, come back in. And that's where that happens, at that membrane.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is save the chat. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to send the chat to everybody, and I'm also going to stop recording right now.